this point is where Lusitania was torpedoed. And this was on the 7th of May 1915 on a voyage which had begun in New York. Meaning there were many neutral Americans on the ship, including Alfred Vanderbilt, one of the richest men in the world at the time. And they were astounded when passing Ireland. They were passing here. They were never going to stop in Cork. They were steaming past in broad daylight, 2:10 in the day. A torpedo from a German U-boat hit the side of Lusitania. That torpedo exploded on impact. A massive second explosion followed. It's incredible then to try and imagine, and tragic, what happened next. Because this great ship, with 2,000 civilians aboard, disappeared entirely in less than 20 minutes. So there's the tragedy in that sentence. Imagine the chaos aboard. Sadly, only 6 lifeboats were on successfully, and 1,200 people died. Almost 1,000 of their bodies never recovered. Telling you they were just taken down in the wreck. They had no chance. Including Vanderbilt. His body was never recovered. And over 120 other neutral Americans were lost in the sinking. Now the good news is 761 survived. They came ashore here, so survivors came ashore. Many of them testified upstairs. Inside that large Venetian window is where the inquest took place. Coroner Horgan announced a cause of death, which sounds like a trial verdict, but this is not a trial. All he had to simply announce was what caused the death of these civilians. But he announced that Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany had committed an act of willful and wholesale murder, which is another way of saying premeditated mass murder. And you'll notice then, after the sinking, a noticeable shift in public opinion globally against Germany in the war, especially in America. You could describe Lusitania as the catalyst, which began to erode America's neutrality in World War I. Although here we are 102 years later, we still have unanswered questions. And have you ever heard the saying, history is written by the winners? Have you ever heard of that? Yeah. You know, a different slant put on events depending on who wins various conflicts. Well, to illustrate that now, I'm going to show you, since I gave you the coin earlier, I'm going to show you a medallion here now. These are known as Lusitanian medallions. And this was minted in Germany in 1915. The idea of these objects was they were conversation pieces. So they would portray topical events as they happened. You can only imagine what would be on them right now. But the idea was then, when you're meeting your friends in the bar or in a cafe, you bring this out and you look at the detail and it would strike up points of conversation. So what's portrayed here is the German version of what happened. And I'll pass it around. But before passing it around, let me translate some of the German for you. First of all, on one side, you'll see hundreds of passengers queuing up in New York to buy Lusitania tickets. And at the back end of the queue, if you look closely, you'll see a gentleman reading a newspaper, like this. The headline read, U-boat warnings. And it's true that the German embassy had warned in 20 American newspapers that any British ship entering the war zone was liable to be sunk. So they're reminding us of that. But what's more dramatic is the ticket seller. Inside the Cunard office selling tickets, a skeleton. Dead selling tickets. And written in German above the heads of the passengers are these words: business over all, or profit over all. So some in Germany were saying, we warned you, yet the Cunard Line decided to risk civilian life by taking them through a war zone to make profit. So certainly a different way of looking at it, you could say an alternative set of facts, we say. And what about the other side? The other side is even more dramatic. Here's where a conspiracy theory emerged. Because here you'll see the Lusitania is sinking, and written in German above it, these words, keine Bahnware, which translate as no contraband, or nothing illegal aboard. Those words are written sarcastically, however, because you'll see falling off the deck of Lusitania as she sinks in Kinsale, a cannon aboard, representing the claim for the first time that there was arms or high explosives on Lusitania. And there's I'll pass it around there, have a close look. There's the conspiracy theory that neutral America perhaps were secretly helping England in the war effort by shipping high explosives to Liverpool under cover of the cruise ship. Now, having said that, the second explosion could also have been the boiler room exploding as cold seawater hit, or it could have been coal dust thrown into the air and ignited. So there are three theories to explain the second explosion before the ship sunk. And the real answer lies on the wreck. You see, the wreck of the ship still lies off our coast in 300 feet of water. It's being salvaged. It's being salvaged by Greg Bemis from New Mexico and the National Geographic History Channel. They're extracting forensic and scientific proof as to what caused the second explosion on the ship and why did she sink so quickly. Which means this morning, I'm going to leave you in suspense basically with these words. For the rest of the story, stay tuned to National Geographic. Although, don't worry, Uncle Rick will have the scoop on PBS as well, okay? Now, I love recommending books. Have any of you read Eric Larson's book on Lusitania? You've read that? Oh yeah, amazing read, isn't it? Eric Larson published a book 2 years ago to coincide with the centenary. And the title immediately intrigued us all. Dead Wake. W-A-K-E. That referred to the wake of the torpedo approaching the ship that day. Sadly, once you see the wake of a torpedo, it's too late, because the torpedo itself was much further ahead. So it's nicknamed a dead man's wake, or a dead wake. And dead wake is fascinating because it tells two sides of the story. I'll tell you how. Chapter 1 starts in New York, this great ship leaving, captained by Captain Turner. Chapter 2 begins in Germany with Captain Schweiger taking the U-boat out. So every second chapter you reimagine being on the U-boat and understanding the motives of the crew, or on the luxury big ship as the tension builds towards Kinsale. It's a real page turner. Dead Wake by Eric Larson. As I mentioned, there's 5 bookstores in Kinsale. I need to keep them going, so I like recommending them. But even if you don't buy the book, as you're browsing here in a bookstore, pick Dead Wake up and flick to the page that describes the torpedo hitting. I guarantee you, once you've read that page, you'll buy the book. It's incredible. I don't get any royalties from Larson, but I just like recommending books. So for us now, by the way, since some of you have read the book and are interested in this, you might want to, after our tour, go up to see the Lusitania graves. They're in the grounds of St. Malto's Church, with some of Phil's ancestors actually. And if you want to see them, go in the main gate of the church, turn right, and you'll see a little footpath going into the graveyard. Walk in there, and just to the left of that footpath, you'll see the graves where the people are described as victims of the Lusitania outrage. And there's a strong word on a tombstone. Outrage. And you can explore the story up there. Also go into the church. Beautiful architecture in there. 12th century, and in even older roots, the baptismal font in there dates to the year 545. So you're really touching history. It's one of the reasons that those old baptismal fonts are one of the reasons why, even though there's a big separation of church and state here, still, most of us Irish will go to church if someone we know is being hatched, matched, or dispatched. You know? Because when you're baptizing, when your daughter is being baptized, you're reminded by the parish priest, who might be your uncle, in my case, that it's in the same baptismal font as your great-great-grandparents. And he'll show you in the record books at the back of the church as well, you know, so a strong tradition there. So for us now, remember the sculpture? In the sculpture now, we're now going to retrace the shoreline on foot and find out all about the reclamation. Although just before we leave the square, turn your attention down this way. A lot of people ask me about the streetscape here. I know we've some urban planners amongst us. It looks quite random, doesn't it? No, there's a distinct pattern here. You see the address here, Market Square, behind me, where all the market traders traded. Notice how many roads lead here. 6 roads, like spokes of a wheel, all leading into the market square. So this is the medieval streetscape, basically, like a spider's web branching out from here. And remember, at the far end of those roads was the wall, and gates, and taxation. By the way, if you're confused about the tax code, it's on display here. Inside the central arch there. The tax code of Kinsale on one page. How simple life was back then, you know? If any of your accountants or tax attorneys, let me know. And a challenge to you later, come back on that code, scan through it, and see if you can spot any loopholes. There were 2 loopholes, and let me tell you actually, especially since Phil is here, it's interesting. One was a bylaw that said the amount of food coming to the market your children could carry through the gate here was tax-free on their backs. So you can imagine piling it all up at the kids. Now you had to, the mother had to be with them. You couldn't round up any group of children. That was listed. Now the second tax break is referring to the taxes on malt, a central ingredient in brewing. And it lists the taxes, and at the end it says freemen and burgesses excepted. So they paid no taxes on malt, on the malt trade, by land or sea to Kinsale. Now who are they? Well, freemen were, you know the way today, as a kind of a ceremony, if you do a lot of good for your city, you'd be granted the freedom of the city and the keys in the ceremony. Back then it was literally the keys to the gates you were granted. And you could come in and didn't have to pay taxes, you could open these gates and come in. So they were the freemen. They were selected by burgesses. Who were the burgesses? The wealthy landowners. In an early form of democracy, they had a vote here. There was only 20 votes to elect the local member of parliament here. And they were burgesses. And you get the trend that they selected